I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like until the day I destroyed the most beautiful relationship I had ever had in just one night. My name is Suzanne, and this is the story of how I became the person I swore I would never be. How I looked into the eyes of the man I loved and accused him of being a thief. How I watched him pack his things and walk out of my life carrying with him a pain I had no idea I was reopening. The worst part? I was completely devastatingly wrong. Before I dive into this story, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what happened next will show you just how quickly trust can crumble and how hard it is to rebuild something once it is broken. 8 months ago, I met Marcus through a dating app, and honestly, I thought those success stories were just myths until he walked into my life. He was 30 years old, worked at a local garage fixing cars, and had this genuine smile that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. I was 28 working as an accountant at a small insurance company, and after years of disappointing dates, Marcus felt like a breath of fresh air. What made Marcus special was his kindness. He would cook dinner for me after his long shifts, even when his hands were still stained with motor oil. He fixed my neighbor's car for free when she could not afford the repairs. He never asked for anything in return, just enjoyed helping people. But there was always something mysterious about him. Whenever I brought up family or his past, he would change the subject or find an excuse to leave the room. Marcus had been staying at my place more and more often. I had given him a spare key about 3 months into our relationship because it felt natural. He would come over after work, we would cook together, watch movies, and talk about our future. We had been planning a trip to Europe together, something I had been dreaming about for years. I had been saving every penny for this trip. My end-of-year bonus plus months of careful budgeting had accumulated into $3,200 in cash. I kept it in an envelope in my bedroom dresser drawer, old-fashioned maybe, but I liked seeing the physical money grow. Marcus knew about the trip fund and had been excited to contribute once he got back on his feet financially. That was the problem, though. Last week, Marcus had lost his job when the garage suddenly shut down due to economic difficulties. The owner could not afford to keep paying his mechanics, and Marcus was devastated. I had never seen him so worried about money before. He kept apologizing for not being able to help with the Europe trip, and I could see the stress eating away at him. Friday evening, I came home from work excited to check our travel fund and maybe book some flights online. I had been researching hotels in Paris all day and could barely contain my excitement. I rushed to my bedroom, opened the dresser drawer, and my heart stopped. The envelope was gone, completely vanished. At first, I thought maybe I had moved it and forgotten. I tore apart my bedroom, looking under the mattress, in the closet, through every drawer. I searched the living room, the kitchen, even the bathroom. Nothing. The money had simply disappeared, and a cold realization began creeping into my mind. Marcus had been home alone that afternoon while I was at work. Marcus came home around 8 o'clock that evening, carrying a small bouquet of roses and a pizza from our favorite place downtown. He was smiling, chatting about his day, mentioning a job interview he had lined up for Monday, but all I could think about was that empty drawer upstairs. I tried to stay calm, but my voice was shaking when I asked him if he had seen an envelope in the bedroom. Marcus immediately looked concerned, set down the pizza, and asked me what was wrong. When I explained about the missing money, I watched his face, carefully searching for any sign of guilt or deception. His reaction seemed genuine enough. He looked shocked, even hurt that I might suspect him. He insisted we search the house together, going through every room methodically. He even suggested we call the police, which confused me because I thought if he had taken the money, why would he want to involve law enforcement? But then my mind started playing tricks on me. I remembered conversations where Marcus had asked about my bank accounts, whether I kept cash at home. I remembered him glancing at that dresser drawer when he was getting dressed. These innocent moments suddenly felt sinister in light of the missing money. My best friend Emma called while we were searching, and when I explained the situation, she reminded me of her earlier warnings about giving Marcus a key so quickly. She did not say it directly, but I could hear the concern in her voice when she said she hoped I would figure out what happened to the money. As the evening wore on and we still had not found anything, I became more and more convinced that Marcus had taken it. He was unemployed, stressed about money, and had complete access to my house. What other explanation could there be? But every time I looked at him, he seemed so genuinely concerned and helpful that I started doubting my own instincts. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus kept trying to comfort me, saying we would figure it out together, that maybe someone had broken in during the day. But I was spiraling into suspicion and anger, convinced that the man I loved was lying to my face while pretending to help me find the money he had stolen. When Marcus tried to put his arm around me and promised we would replace the money together once he found a new job, something inside me snapped. All the doubt and suspicion exploded into rage, and I found myself saying words I never thought I would say to someone I loved. I accused him directly of stealing my money. The moment those words left my mouth, I saw something die in Marcus's eyes. He stepped back from me like I had physically struck him, and his face went completely pale. For a long moment, we just stared at each other in horrible silence. "You think I am a thief," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "After everything we have been through together, you actually believe I would steal from you." I was too angry and hurt to back down. I demanded that he tell me the truth, that he stop pretending, and just admit what he had done. I told him I knew he had been home alone, that he was desperate for money, and that there was no other explanation for the missing cash. Marcus just stood there shaking his head slowly. He was not angry, which somehow made everything worse. He just looked broken, devastated in a way that should have made me realize I was making a terrible mistake. But I was too caught up in my own sense of betrayal to see what I was really doing to him. "I cannot believe this is happening again," he said more to himself than to me. "I thought you were different. I thought you actually knew who I was." That comment only made me angrier. I told him to stop playing games and manipulating me. I demanded that he return the money and leave my house immediately. I was screaming by this point, saying things about trust and betrayal that I knew would cut deep. Marcus went upstairs and quietly packed his things while I stood in the living room shaking with anger and adrenaline. When he came back down with his duffel bag, he placed my spare key on the coffee table without saying a word. Just before he reached the door, he turned around and looked at me one last time. There were tears in his eyes, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "You know what hurts the most, Suzanne. I actually thought you were the one person who would never doubt me. But you are exactly like them." I demanded to know what he meant by them, but he just shook his head and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and suddenly my house felt completely empty. I stood there for a long time, still angry, but also beginning to feel the first hints of doubt creeping into my mind. 3 days passed, and despite my anger, I could not stop thinking about Marcus. I missed his laugh, the way he made coffee in the mornings, even the sound of his keys in the door. I tried to convince myself that I had done the right thing, that I could not be with someone who would steal from me. But something about his reaction kept bothering me. On Monday afternoon, I was cleaning the house, trying to keep busy and stop thinking about him. I was going through my winter clothes, deciding what to donate when I reached into the pocket of my heavy wool coat. My fingers touched something that made my blood run cold. The envelope. The exact envelope containing all $3,200. I stared at it in disbelief, my hands shaking as I counted the money. Every single bill was there exactly as I had left it. Then I remembered. The week before Marcus lost his job, I had been worried about keeping so much cash in the house. I had moved it to my coat pocket before a business trip, planning to deposit it when I returned. But I had been so busy with work that I had completely forgotten. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had accused an innocent man of theft. I had destroyed our relationship over my own forgetfulness. The look on Marcus's face when I called him a thief suddenly made perfect sense, and I felt sick to my stomach. I immediately tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I called again and again, leaving increasingly desperate messages apologizing and begging him to call me back, but he never answered. By evening, I was panicking, so I drove to his apartment building. The landlord informed me that Marcus had moved out over the weekend and had not left a forwarding address. I asked neighbors, but no one knew where he had gone. It was like he had vanished completely, and I was beginning to understand that I might have lost him forever. I contacted Danny, Marcus's closest friend from the garage, hoping he might know where Marcus had gone. At first, Danny was hostile, refusing to give me any information. But when I broke down crying and explained about finding the money, his attitude shifted slightly. "You really messed him up, Suzanne," Danny said finally. "Do you have any idea what you put him through? What those accusations did to him?" When I asked what he meant, Danny hesitated for a long moment before deciding to tell me something Marcus had clearly never shared with me. When Marcus was 17, his family accused him of stealing $5,000 from his father's safe. They never believed his denials, never listened to his side of the story. His own parents chose to believe he was a thief rather than trust their son. I felt the room spinning around me. But did he actually take the money? "No," Danny said quietly. His younger brother had stolen it to buy drugs, but the family found it easier to blame Marcus. They disowned him, threw him out of the house, and never spoke to him again. He has been on his own ever since, working and supporting himself while his family pretended he did not exist. The pieces of Marcus's behavior suddenly made horrible sense. His reluctance to talk about family, his reaction to my accusation, his final words about me being exactly like them. I had unknowingly recreated the most traumatic experience of his life. Danny eventually gave me the address of a motel where Marcus was staying, warning me that he probably would not want to see me. But I had to try. I owed him that much. I bought flowers and wrote a long letter apologizing for everything, explaining about finding the money and begging for another chance. When I knocked on the motel room door, Marcus answered, looking like he had not slept in days. His eyes were red and swollen, and he had lost weight. When he saw me, his face hardened. I tried to hand him the letter and flowers, but he would not take them. "You found the money," he said simply. It was not a question. "Marcus, I am so sorry. I was wrong about everything. Please, can we talk?" But he was already shaking his head. "Do you know what you did to me, Suzanne? You opened up wounds I thought had finally healed. You made me relive the worst experience of my life. When my own family accused me of being a thief, I told myself that someday I would find people who really knew me, who would never doubt me like that." I could see the pain in his eyes, and I realized that my apology, no matter how sincere, could not undo the damage I had caused. "You made me believe that was possible," he continued. "And then you proved that I was fooling myself all along." Before I could respond, he closed the door, leaving me standing in the parking lot holding wilted flowers and a letter he would never read. I spent that entire night in my car outside the motel, hoping Marcus might change his mind and talk to me. But he never came out, and the next morning I watched him load his few belongings into his old pickup truck and drive away without looking back. Most people would have given up at that point. Maybe they would have been right to do so. But I could not live with the knowledge that I had broken someone who had already been broken too many times before. I had to find a way to make this right, not just for my own guilt, but because Marcus deserved to know that someone was willing to fight for him. I started researching Marcus's family online, something I probably should have done months earlier. Through social media and public records, I found his parents living in a small town about 4 hours away. I learned that his younger brother had died in a car accident 2 years ago likely, while under the influence of drugs. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage, but finally I made the drive to Marcus's hometown. I found his childhood address and knocked on the door of a modest house with a well-maintained garden. His mother answered, a tired-looking woman in her 60s, who immediately became suspicious when I mentioned Marcus's name. I explained who I was and why I was there. I told them about the man their son had become, about his kindness and integrity, about how he helped others, even when he had nothing for himself. I showed them pictures on my phone of Marcus fixing cars for elderly neighbors, volunteering at the local animal shelter, always putting others first. His father joined the conversation, and I could see the conflict in both their faces. They wanted to believe what I was telling them, but 13 years of believing their son was a thief was not easy to overcome. "He never took your money," I said firmly. "I know this because I accused him of the same thing and I was wrong. I found the money exactly where I had left it, hidden in my own coat pocket. But more than that, I know it because of who Marcus is. He would never steal from anyone, especially not from people he loves." The conversation lasted for hours. I told them about Marcus's work ethic, his dreams, his loneliness. I explained how their rejection had shaped him, how he carried the pain of their disbelief every single day. Slowly, I began to see cracks in their certainty. Finally, his mother broke down crying. "We knew," she whispered. "Deep down, we always knew it was probably Tommy who took that money. But Marcus was older, and we thought he should be responsible. And then years went by, and it became too hard to admit we might have been wrong." His father was crying too now. "We lost both our sons," he said. "One to drugs, and one to our own stupidity. And now Tommy is gone forever, and Marcus probably hates us." I convinced them to call Marcus. It took several attempts over the next few days, but eventually he answered the phone. The conversation was awkward and painful, but his parents apologized sincerely and begged him to come home even just for a visit. Marcus was suspicious at first, wondering why they were reaching out now after all these years. When they told him about my visit, I could hear his voice change over the speakerphone. He was not angry exactly, but I could tell he was confused about why I had gotten involved. After much convincing, Marcus agreed to meet his parents at a neutral location, the small diner where he had worked as a teenager. I drove back to town that day, not to interfere, but because I needed to see him one more time. I sat in my car across the street and watched through the diner window as Marcus walked in and saw his parents for the first time in 13 years. The reunion was tentative at first, but then I saw his mother reach across the table and take his hand, and suddenly they were all crying and holding each other. I was crying too, sitting alone in my car watching the family I had helped bring back together. After about an hour, Marcus came outside and walked directly to my car. I rolled down the window, not knowing what to expect. "Why did you do this?" he asked. His voice was not angry anymore, just tired and confused. "Because you deserved to have your family back," I said. "And because they needed to know the truth about who their son really is." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, looking back at the diner where his parents were waiting. "You know this does not fix what happened between us," he said finally. "I know," I replied. "I do not expect forgiveness, Marcus. I just wanted you to know that someone was willing to fight for you the way no one ever has before." He studied my face for what felt like forever, before speaking again. What you did for me today, bringing my family back together, it means more than I can ever express. You did something my family could not do for 13 years. You believed in me enough to drive 4 hours and convince strangers that I was worth trusting. I could see he was struggling with conflicting emotions. But I need time, Suzanne. What you put me through brought back a lot of pain, and I cannot just forget that because you made things right with my parents. I nodded, understanding completely. I do not expect anything from you, Marcus. I just needed you to know how sorry I am, and that you deserved better than what I gave you. We talked for another few minutes before he went back into the diner. I drove home that day, not knowing if I would ever see him again, but feeling something like peace for the first time in weeks. 2 months later, Marcus called me. He said he had been in therapy, working through the trauma of his childhood and learning to trust again. He told me that what I had done in reuniting him with his family had shown him something important about love and commitment. "You made a terrible mistake," he said during that phone call. "But then you spent weeks trying to fix it, not just for yourself, but for me. That is not something someone does unless they really love someone." We started slowly meeting for coffee, taking walks, rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. It was not easy, and there were moments when I could see the old hurt flash across his face. But gradually, we began to find our way back to each other. Marcus taught me that real love is not just about the good times. It is about what you do when you mess up catastrophically. It is about being willing to fight for someone even when they cannot fight for themselves. It is about proving through actions, not just words, that you are committed to being better. We did eventually take that trip to Europe 8 months later than originally planned. But it meant more because of everything we had been through together. We had learned that love without trust is impossible, but that trust once broken can be rebuilt stronger than before if both people are willing to do the work. Looking back, I realized that my biggest mistake was not losing the money or even accusing Marcus of theft. My biggest mistake was giving up on us the moment things got difficult. Real love means believing in someone even when the evidence seems stacked against them. It means choosing to trust the person you know them to be, not the person your fears make them out to be. Marcus forgave me, but more importantly, he forgave his family. That little diner reunion led to regular phone calls, holiday visits, and eventually Marcus walking me down the aisle at our wedding, because his father had asked for the honor of giving away the bride. Some wounds can heal, but only if we are brave enough to keep loving imperfectly. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to us leads to the best thing that could happen to us. I almost lost Marcus forever because of my own fear and doubt, but in fighting to get him back, I learned what it really means to love someone unconditionally. Have you ever made a mistake that almost cost you everything that mattered to you? How did you find the courage to make things right? Please share your story in the comments below, because I believe we all need reminders that second chances are possible when we are willing to fight for them. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about love, forgiveness, and second chances. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is never too late to make things right. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you all the courage to fight for the people you love, even when it seems impossible.